Namaste and welcome to the Dharma podcast. In today's episode, we will narrate the tragic and the forgotten history of the Prahladapuri Temple and the lessons that it teaches us. To do that, we need to travel all the way to Multan, which is now in Pakistan. Today, Multan is home to the world's largest repository of Sufi shrines. The original names of Multan included Moolasthana, Kashyapura, Kaspatryus, that is a name mentioned by the ancient Greek historian Herodotus. Moolasthana was also the first major ancient Tirthakshetra or place of pilgrimage to be attacked and savaged by the Arab Muslim raider named Muhammad bin Qasim, who desecrated the city, vandalized the Vigraha of the grand Aditya temple or the Sun temple, which was the cynosure of the city of Multan. This temple had a prior antiquity of at least 800 years before Qasim pillaged the place, and Hindus had considered Moolasthana on par with other sacred cities like Kashi, Mathura, Ayodhya, Prayagraj, Kanchipuram, Rameshwaram, and so on. But there was another equally sacred temple in Moolasthana apart from the Aditya Mandir. The sacred annals of Hindu literature tell us that the celebrated Bhagavata, Prahlada, he had built a temple for Narasimha Swami in Moolasthana. It was therefore eponymously known as the Prahladpuri Temple, and unlike the Aditya Mandir, it had withstood repeated Islamic ravages all the way till 1992. According to some traditions, the Holika Dahan festival or the wildly popular Holi festival originated at Prahladapuri. Now, the history of Prahladapuri Temple is painfully similar to the tragic history of all Hindu temples in what is now known as Pakistan. After Muslim rulers consolidated large parts of northwestern and northern India, Multan emerged as one of the most strategic and lucrative provinces. And so, under various sultans, Muslim governors fiercely competed with each other, they murdered each other in order to control this wealthy province. In fact, even as early as in Iltutmish's regime, Hindu political power had been pretty much completely destroyed in this region. However, it is also a great testimony to the piety, devotion, and the indomitable spirit of resistance that ordinary Hindus showed in safeguarding the Prahladpuri temple for almost a millennium under extremely painful and oppressive conditions. Now let's forward to 1810. In this year, we observe a brilliant renewal of the same undying spirit of Hindu resistance. But by this period, Islamic political power in Multan had pretty much been crushed, but the social composition and social dynamics of the city narrate a cautionary tale which is valid even today. Centuries of Muslim rule had obviously implanted a customary feeling in the Muslim community's psyche that they were the masters of the place and the Kafirs or Hindus were the slaves. On the other side, the Muslim community in Multan was bristling and groaning under centuries of humiliation and was thirsting for freedom and vengeance, both of which came in the year 1817 and 1818 when Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the Lion of Punjab, decisively shattered the Afghan hold over Multan and terrified them in a fashion from which they are yet to recover. In the year 1810, the Afghan warlord Muzaffar Khan was in command of Multan, and despite Ranjit Singh's growing power and influence, The Hindus in the city were far from being liberated. But as a community, they gathered the guts to raise the height of the Prahladapuri Temple. The Muslims were obviously inflamed and they retaliated, leading to enormous tensions. Now let's cut to the year 1831. That year, Alexander Burnes, who was a Scottish military officer and a diplomat, visited Multan. And this is what he writes in his travelogue titled Travels into Bukhara. And I quote, "The city of Multan is upwards of 3 miles in circumference, surrounded by a dilapidated wall and overlooked on the north by a fortress of strength. It contains a population of about 60,000 people, 1/3 of whom may be Hindus. The rest of the population is Mohammedan. The Afghans have left the country since they ceased to govern. At Multan, we first saw the practice of religion amongst the Sikhs. In a veranda of the tomb of Shamsi Tabrizi, a Sikh guru had taken up his residence since the conquest of the city." Close quote. 3 realities of history emerges from Alexander's narrative. The first, Alexander Burnes visited Multan after Maharaja Ranjit Singh had expelled the Afghans from the city. The second, it is a fact that Hindus and Sikhs comprise the minority population in Multan. But the third is truly significant and paves the way for several historical insights. We will look at them one by one. Historically, Hindu kings who had defeated their Muslim counterparts did not demolish or usurp their masjids and maktabs and madrasas and dargahs. But in a rare departure from that time-honored practice of misplaced Hindu generosity, we have here an instance that epitomizes the Sanskrit proverb Paradandenaiva Parasyatadanam, meaning beat the enemy with his own stick or pay the enemy back in his own coin. So Maharaja Ranjit Singh, after conquering Multan, had converted the Sufi fanatic named Shamsi Tabrizi's Dargah into a Gurudwara. Interestingly, Shamsi Tabrizi was the teacher of Jalaluddin Rumi, who still gives wet dreams to several Hindus who believe in the myth called the Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb. Now we can return to Alexander Burnes once more. With great feeling, he describes the piety of the aforementioned Sikh guru in Shamsi Tabrizi's former dargah. And I quote, "We found a Sikh guru seated on the ground with a huge volume of the Guru Granth Sahib in front of him and a place covered with cloth like an altar at one end of the apartment. He opened a book at my request and repeating the words Vahe Guru Ki Fateh, touched the volume with his forehead, and all the Sikhs in attendance immediately bowed to the ground. The Guru waves a churi or a Tibet cow's tail over it as if he were fanning an emperor. The Guru was free from pomp and pride and gave a willing explanation to our inquiries." Close quote. This itself opens up another insight. Now, the downfall of the powerful Sikh Empire in many ways can be compared to the fall of the Vijayanagara Empire. While the Vijayanagara Empire had safeguarded Sanatana Dharma in South India against Islamic invasions, the Sikh Empire had recovered vast areas of Hindu territory which had been lost to Islamic sultans. Maharaja Ranjit Singh had single-handedly brought the entire northwestern India back into the Hindu fold for the first time after 600 years of Islamic rule. And we have 2 eyewitness proofs for this truth. Proof number 1. This is once again given by Alexander Burnes. In the same description of the former dargah, he writes, and I quote, "The presence of the Sikh priest and the paraphernalia of his order under the roof of a Mohammedan tomb will furnish a good commentary on the state of that religion in this country. Islam is barely tolerated. In this city, which held for upwards of 800 years so high a Mohammedan supremacy, there is now no public namaz. The true believer dare not lift his voice in public. The Eids and the Muharram pass without the usual observances. The Allahu Akbar of the priest is never heard. The mosques are yet frequented, but the pious are reduced to offering up their prayers in silence. Such has been the state of things since Multan fell in 1818, and yet the number of Sikhs is confined to that of the garrison from 400 to 500 men. The Mohammedans, who amount to about 40,000, suffer no other inconvenience from their new masters who afford every protection to their trade. The Sikhs excuse themselves by alleging that they have not inflicted in retribution even one-fourth of their own sufferings at the hands of the Mohammedans. They are, I believe, correct in the assessment. Close quote. The second proof comes directly from the horse's mouth, and the name of this horse is Shah Waliullah, and he predates Alexander Burns by a few decades. Shah Waliullah wrote prolific and anxious letters inviting Ahmad Shah Abdali to invade India from Afghanistan in order to rescue Islam from the clutches of the hated infidels. Waliullah identified the Marathas and the Jats as the primary sources that instilled pure terror in the hearts of the Ghazis or Islamic warriors. Now, I'll read out a few excerpts from Shah Waliullah's letters. Quote, number 1. Among the non-Muslim communities, one is that of the Maratha. For some time past, this community has been raising its head and has become influential all over Hindustan. 2. In the countryside between Delhi and Agra, the Jat community used to till the land so far. In the reign of Shah Jahan, this community had been ordered not to ride on horses or keep muskets with them or build fortresses for themselves. The sultans that came later became careless, and this community has used the opportunity for building many forts and collecting muskets. In the reign of Muhammad Shah, the impudence of this community crossed all limits, and Surajmal became its leader. He took to rebellion. Therefore, the city of Bayana, which was an ancient seat of Islam and where the ulema and the Sufis had lived for 700 years, has now been occupied by force and terror, and Muslims have been ejected out of it with humiliation and hurt. Whatever influence and prestige is left with the kingship at present is wielded by the Hindus. The story is long and cannot be summarized. What I mean to say is that the country of Hindustan has passed under the power of non-Muslims. 4. Allah forbid. If the infidels continue as at present and Muslims get further weakened, the very name of Islam will get wiped out. 5. Allah forbid. If the power of the infidels remains in its present position, Muslims will renounce Islam. Close quote. Shah Waliullah died in 1762. His death coincided with the decline of the Maratha power and the nascent resurgence of the Muslim power under the Duranis. But it was Maharaja Ranjit Singh who not only crushed the resurgence but inaugurated a powerful era of assertive Hindu revival, as we have seen earlier. Which brings us back to Multan and the famous Prahladapuri Temple. And this is how Alexander Burns describes it. Quote, in the interior of the Multan fort, there is a Hindu temple which its votaries believe to be of boundless antiquity. This Hindu temple, which goes by the name of Prahladpuri, is a low building supported by wooden pillars with idols of Hanuman and Ganesha as guardians to its portal. It is the only place of Hindu worship in Multan. We were denied entrance to it. Let that sink in. The only place of Hindu worship in Multan in 1831. The temple was doggedly protected by a small garrison of Sikhs and Hindus against great odds. The garrison also provided shelter to the minority Hindu and Sikh community in this city, and this minority was outnumbered by a ratio of 3:1. In 1849, the Sikh Empire was destroyed. It was pretty much a closed chapter, and with its destruction, the Sikh and the Hindu community in Multan simultaneously lost its protective shield. The Prahladpuri Temple survived in a perilous fashion for nearly 150 years after this event. In 1970s, the Moolamurti, or the main deity in the temple sanctum sanctorum, was secretly transported to a temple in Haridwar after the Pakistan government's Evacuee Trust Property Board took complete control of the Prahladpuri Temple. And eventually, a madrasa was built in the temple's premises. And in 1992, a fanatical Muslim mob completely demolished the temple. It was their vengeance for the demolition of the disputed structure, also known as the erstwhile Babri Masjid. If you found this episode useful, please click the like button and don't forget to subscribe to the Dharma podcast to get new episodes. Also consider supporting our work. Thank you.